Donald Trump, 25 years old, walks into his father's office with blueprints for a Manhattan apartment building. Fred Trump has spent 40 years building an empire in Brooklyn and Queens. Middle-income housing, solid, predictable, profitable. He looks at his son's plans and says words that would stop most young men. Son, you don't know Manhattan. That's not our world. 6 months later, Donald will prove that Manhattan is exactly his world, and Fred will have to redefine what our world means. Brooklyn, New York, May 1971, Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. Fred Trump's office sits on Avenue Z in a modest two-story building, nothing flashy. No luxury marble, no crystal chandeliers, no city views. Just a simple office, metal filing cabinets, wooden desk, family photos, and construction projects on the walls. This is the headquarters of Fred Trump's empire, but it doesn't look like it. Fred Trump is 66 years old, powerfully built, gray-haired with hard features. Conservative suit, no tie, shoes practical but not polished. He doesn't do show. He works. For 40 years. Every day. Fred's formula is simple. Build housing for middle-income families. Find tenants. Collect rent. Repeat. In Brooklyn. In Queens. In Staten Island. Never Manhattan. Manhattan is another planet for Fred. The place of the wealthy, the speculators, the risky investments. Fred doesn't take risks. He trusts proven formulas. For 40 years, this formula has worked, made his family wealthy. Why change? A knock on the door. Come in, Fred says without looking up, examining reports on his desk. Donald Trump enters. 25 years old, tall, handsome, wearing a suit but more modern than his father's, more stylish. Hair swept back, walking with confidence. In his hands, rolled plans and a folder. Manhattan plans. Dad, Donald says, closing the door behind him. We need to talk. Fred looks up, studies his son. He recognizes that expression on Donald's face. Determined, excited. He's going to ask for something, and Fred will probably say no. Sit, Fred says, pointing to the chair across from his desk. Donald sits, spreads the plans on the table. Dad, I found an opportunity. A big opportunity. Fred leans forward, looks at the plans. Apartment building. Looks good, detailed. Then he sees the location. Manhattan, 68th Street, Upper East Side. Fred leans back, crosses his arms. Manhattan, he says flatly. Not a question. An observation. And in that tone, there's no approval. Yes, Donald speaks excitedly. 68th Street near 3rd Avenue. Great location. Subway nearby, parks nearby. Upper East Side is developing. Manhattan, Fred repeats, his voice now a bit harder. Donald, we're not in the Manhattan business. I know, but we're successful in Brooklyn, Fred interrupts. We're successful in Queens. Why leave something we know for something we don't? Donald leans forward. Because Manhattan is the future. Brooklyn and Queens are great, but Manhattan is a different level. When you build there, you're not just making money. You're making a name, gaining prestige. Fred shakes his head, but he doesn't look convinced. Prestige doesn't pay the rent. I've been doing this for 40 years. Keep it simple. Don't complicate. Build housing for middle-income families. Collect rent. Continue. It works. But Dad, the world is changing. Young professionals are moving to Manhattan. There's demand. Prices are rising. Now is the right time to get in. No, Fred says sharply. Final decision tone. You don't know Manhattan. The room goes quiet. Those words hang in the air. You don't know. Donald leans back, looks at his father. Not angry, not even disappointed. Just taking notes. Because this isn't the first time Donald has heard a no, and it won't be the last. So what don't I know? Donald asks calmly. Fred leans forward, pointing with his finger, tapping the desk to emphasize each point. Manhattan is a different game. Different players. Big money, big risks. Politics. Unions. Zoning rules far more complex than ours. Permits are difficult. Competitors are ruthless. You're 25 years old. You have no experience. Manhattan will eat you alive. Donald listens, doesn't interrupt, waits for his father to finish. Fred continues. In Brooklyn, we know who we are. We build housing for working-class families. Good housing. Affordable. We know the demand. We know the costs. The risks are controlled. The middle class never disappears. They always need housing, safe. But Manhattan, Fred cuts him off sharply, is not for you. Not yet. Maybe in 10 years, maybe 20, but not now. Right now, you need to learn in Brooklyn, gain experience, learn the fundamentals. Then maybe we'll talk about Manhattan. Fred closes the folder. It means the conversation is over. My answer is no. There are other projects. In Brooklyn, in Queens, focus on those. Donald slowly begins gathering his plans, not arguing, because you can't argue with your father. Fred Trump doesn't accept arguments, he only gives orders. And Donald just received an order. No, no Manhattan. But as Donald leaves the office, a plan is forming in his head. Because there's something Fred doesn't know. Donald is already thinking about alternatives. And no doesn't mean the end for Donald. It just means find another way. That evening, Donald goes to Manhattan, alone. In his car, crossing the bridge, from Brooklyn to Manhattan, the city skyline glittering ahead. Skyscrapers, lights, energy. This is the world Donald wants. Not his father's world, his own. He drives to the property on 68th Street. Empty lot. There was an old apartment building, demolished. Now just empty land, but the potential is enormous. Location is perfect. The area is developing. New restaurants, new stores, young professionals moving in. Donald gets out of his car, looks at the lot, sees in his mind a building standing there. Modern, elegant. Trump's signature, not yet. But it will be. He walks to a phone booth, finds change, dials a number. A realtor he met, Louise Sunshine, someone who knows the Manhattan market. The phone rings several times. Hello? Louise's voice. Louise, Donald Trump, we need to talk about the 68th Street property. Donald, Louise smiles, her voice warm. Did you talk to your father? I did. He said no. Silence. I'm sorry. I'm not, Donald says calmly. Because I'm going to find another way. What do you mean? Donald takes a deep breath. Louise, Dad won't provide financing. But I still want this property. I need to find other investors, partners. Can you help me? Louise pauses. Donald, you're 25 years old. You have no experience. Who will trust you? You're right, but I'm not just asking for money. I'm asking for knowledge, mentorship. I want to learn Manhattan. And the best way to learn is to be in it. Louise listens. There's something in Donald's voice. Determination. Belief. Maybe this is it. Maybe this kid has something. There's someone I should introduce you to, Louise finally says. His name is Ben Holloway, experienced developer, been in Manhattan for 20 years. Maybe he'll talk to you. Maybe he'll consider a partnership. No guarantees. All I need is a chance, Donald says. Can you arrange it? I'll try. I'll call you. The phone hangs up. Donald exits the phone booth, looks at the lot again. It's dark now, but Donald sees a future. A bright future. 2 weeks later, Donald meets with Ben Holloway. A steakhouse in Midtown. Lunch, full of businessmen. Ben is in his 50s, experienced, wealthy, skeptical. Across from him sits a 25-year-old kid with no Manhattan experience, but speaking with confidence. Why should I trust you? Ben asks directly. Not wasting time. Donald is prepared. Because I'll do the work. You provide the knowledge, I'll do the job. You show the strategy, I'll execute. This is learning for me. For you, it's getting low-cost labor on a good deal. Ben raises his eyebrows. What does your father say? He said no. And you're still here? Yes. Because I'm finding my own way, not my father's way. Ben leans back, looks at Donald for a long time. Then surprisingly, he smiles. You know, when I was young, I did something my father said no to. I proved to him he was wrong. Maybe you can too. So you're in? Ben pauses, then extends his hand. 50-50. You manage the project. I provide financing and consulting. Deal? Donald shakes his hand. Firm. Deal. The first partnership, the first Manhattan Project. Without his father's approval, but with Donald's own power. 6 months pass quickly. Donald is in Manhattan every day, getting permits, meeting with contractors, working with architects, managing financing. Ben is beside him, teaching, guiding. But Donald is not a student, he's a partner, active, determined. The project begins. Foundations are laid on 68th Street. Construction continues. Donald is there every morning, wearing a hard hat, talking to workers, checking progress. Manhattan is no longer foreign, it's his place. Fred knows. Of course he knows. Brooklyn is a small community. Everyone talks. Fred Trump's son is building in Manhattan, without his father's approval. Fred says nothing, not yet, but he's watching. 6 months later, November 1971, the project is nearly complete. The building is rising. On 68th Street, modern, elegant. Not the Trump name yet, but Donald's first real Manhattan success. One day, Donald is at the construction site wearing a helmet, reviewing plans, a phone rings. Someone from the site office runs over. "Mr. Trump, you have a visitor." Donald turns. At the entrance, Fred Trump stands, wearing a hard hat, not speaking, just looking. Donald is shocked. "Dad?" Fred walks, looks at the construction site, examines the building, the foundations, the structure, the workmanship. Says nothing, just looks. Long silence. Then Fred turns, looks at Donald. His expression is hard to read. Angry, disappointed, proud. "Good work," Fred says simply. Donald breathes, those 2 words. Good work, from his father, enough. "Thank you, Dad." Fred looks around again. "You were right. Manhattan is different. But you learned fast." "I'm still learning," Fred nods. "Good, never stop." Then he pauses, looks into Donald's eyes. I was wrong. I said you don't know Manhattan, but you learned fast." Donald smiles. "That's the biggest compliment I've ever heard from you." Fred laughs slightly. "Rare." "Don't get cocky. You've got more work ahead." But Fred stays, 1 hour, 2 hours. They tour the project together. Fred asks questions. Donald answers. Father and son. For the first time, on equal footing. Not student and teacher, partners. Before Fred leaves, he puts his hand on Donald's shoulder. "On the next project, maybe I'll invest too." Donald nods. "I'd like that." Fred leaves, but something has changed. Donald is no longer walking in his father's footsteps. He's carving his own path, and Fred, for the first time, is approving it. Donald Trump's story with his father Fred about Manhattan isn't just about a real estate deal. It's about generational vision, and the fact that sometimes children can see further than their parents. Fred Trump built a successful formula over 40 years. Brooklyn, Queens, middle-income housing. It worked, made millions. Why change? But Fred was seeing the world through the eyes of the 1930s, 40s, 50s. Manhattan was a risky place then, unstable. But in the 1970s, the world was changing. Young professionals were coming. Demands were shifting. Donald saw this. Fred didn't. And that's normal. Every generation sees the world differently. Parents speak with experience. Children speak with the future. Both can be right. Both can be wrong. But what matters is listening, learning, and sometimes taking risks. Donald respected Fred. Didn't argue, didn't yell, just found another way. And that's power, because recognizing authority is important, but not abandoning your own vision is also important. Fred, after 6 months, came, looked, admitted. "I was wrong." The hardest words to say, especially for a parent. But Fred said them, because Fred grew too, saw that his son had grown. And Donald? In those 6 months, Donald didn't just build a building. He built his self-confidence. He learned Manhattan. And most importantly, he learned how to find his own way. Years later, in the 1980s when he built Trump Tower, Fred visited. 58 floors, luxury, on Fifth Avenue. Fred looked up, smiled. "You were right," he said. "Manhattan really was the future." Donald smiled. "Did you learn from me?" Fred laughed. "Maybe. But you learned from me too. Work ethic, determination, never giving up. I taught you Brooklyn. You taught me Manhattan." Now a question for you. Do you have a Fred in your life? Someone who tells you you don't know this? Someone who says no to you based on their own experience? And what did you do? Did you listen and give up? Or did you do what Donald did, respect them, but find your own way? Because life is full of people who say, you don't know. And sometimes they're right. You really don't know. But sometimes you see something different. You see the future. And then, politely but firmly, you must find your own way. When Donald Trump was 25 years old, his father told him he wouldn't succeed in Manhattan. 6 months later, Donald succeeded. And Fred watched, learned, and grew. What will your 6 months be? Whose "you don't know" will you turn into "I learned"? The clock is ticking. Learn.